Hello, it's Rafa here, and I've been asked to shoot a little video on the pros and cons of open relationships. Now, this is such a deep subject, it could really feel a long video. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. But I have to start by mentioning the fact that, as far as I am concerned, I don't apply so much the label of open and closed relationships anymore, for a number of reasons. But I much more prefer to talk about openness in relationships. You know, like in an intimate relationship, just to make an example, you can have a higher or lower degree of sexuality, right? Like some relationships are more intensely sexual than others, and the same relationship in different times of its evolution can be more or less sexual. I think something similar happens with openness. You can introduce a smaller or higher amount of openness in your relationship, and different relationships will have different degrees of openness, and the same relationship over the course of its life can possibly have different degrees of openness. So I'd like you to think about openness in relationships not so much as an on-off switch, it's either open or closed, but more as a slider that you can fine-tune to the extent of openness that makes sense for you and your partner. That said, what is openness after all? Openness, at least in this context, is the possibility for both partners in a relationship to have some sort of intimacy or sexual connection with someone else. That's basically the definition I give to openness. And as you can see, as I said before, you can have different degrees of openness. For example, a certain relationship could be open for both partners to just have sporadic sexual encounters with others. Or another kind of relationship could be the one in which we give full openness for both people involved to even have romantic, love, deep, intense relationships with other people, more stepping into what we will call polyamory. So with all these varieties of openness, from polyamory to polyfidelity to the swingers kind of framework in which sexual interactions are allowed under some guidelines, but not so much going into romantic interactions and connections, etc., etc. With all this variety at our disposal, why should we even think about bringing openness in our relationship? What are the advantages? Why do people decide to bring openness into their intimacy? And are there any disadvantages to it? I think personally there's both, right? There's both very clear advantages to openness and some quite specific disadvantage. To keep it brief, among the advantages that first come to my mind, the pros, I would mention that having more than one intimate sexual connection is a little bit like having more than one friend, right? I mean, most of us enjoy the possibility of having friends that are more outgoing and adventurous, while others are more talkative and deep, etc., etc. From different friendships, we are nurtured in different ways. It's not that much different with lovers and sexual connections. A lover could be very supportive in a certain aspect of your life and have a certain sexual energy that really meets you in a certain aspect of your sexuality, while another lover could provide completely different things to your intimacy. And that in itself can be enriching, for sure. Also, if you decide to allow the possibility for more than one intimate and sexual connection in your life, automatically you take some steam off you, in the sense that you don't need to find the completely perfect lover that can match you on all your levels, right? You can be content with a certain degree of affinity with some lovers because you know that other people can fill in the gaps in your life, which actually can make for a very beautiful transition, can enable you to live relationships in a much more easygoing way. Like, you don't need to put so much pressure on your partners to be perfect. But aside from these more like practical considerations, I would also like to point out something a bit deeper. Quite a few people decide to bring openness into their relationships as a deep, personal, almost I would say spiritual practice. That pretty much comes from the realization that at some deep level we humans are all connected, and in a certain sense we're all one. That's what every spiritual school on this planet in one way or another says. So well, there is a certain interesting thought about that, or consequence about that, which is if we are all connected and we're all one, then what is the big issue with your lover or partner being connected intimately, perhaps even sexually, to someone else? In the end of the day, we're all one, we're all connected. It shouldn't be such a threat to our sense of well-being that our lover, our partner can enjoy intimacy, sexuality with someone else. So out of this line of reasoning, quite a few people, in my opinion, correctly believe that bringing openness in relationships can be a very straightforward, a very quick and direct way to work on your spiritual and personal growth. Of course, as all shortcuts, it is a quite tough one, especially for some people. I mean, bringing openness into your intimate life, you're going to face some quite intense challenges, especially because your partner or partners will also be engaging in relationships with other people, and that creates all sorts of complex scenarios. But I would say for many, many human beings on this planet, the price is worth it. Openness in relationships can really bring you to a space of freedom, openness, and simply acceptance of what is. In the end of the day, we could also see it that way. Openness is all about removing constraints, right? Full openness is when you allow your partner, your lover, to do whatever they please because you trust them, you trust life in general, so you don't need to put any conditions on the relationship. In that sense, I believe there are some pretty intense and deep advantages to openness in relationships. And now let's be as objective as possible. Are there also any disadvantages to it? Well, after some years experiencing openness from my own side and also seeing it in many people surrounding me, I do have to say that there are some practical issues that can come up quite strongly when you play with openness in your relationship. One of them is simply opposition from society, family, well-meaning friends that will be shocked when you tell them that you have 2 boyfriends or 2 girlfriends or 4 lovers. Even if all of you are okay with that, still that can create some havoc in your workplace, in your family environment, for example. Just imagine how your parents or grandparents or relatives would react if you said that you will go back for Christmas or a family reunion with 2 partners. Even if the 3 of you are perfectly okay, most families will struggle with that situation, will find it quite challenging and threatening. Even laws are not very friendly to people that experience openness in relationships. It's not so easy to have, for example, a marriage with 2 people. Even if everyone is agreeing on that, if 3 people want to marry and create a group marriage, most countries in this world will not allow that by law. So you can imagine that that creates quite a good amount of opposition. Also, having an open, intimate life can quite often mean more complexity in your love life. If dealing with one partner is sometimes complex enough and difficult enough, dealing with 2 or 3, especially as relationships become deeper, more intricate, and at the same time more rewarding, can be quite a feat. As far as I've seen, practically that means dedicating more time and more energy to your intimacy, the more the number of lovers in your life grows, the more time and energy you need to dedicate to that overall. And finally, I would also mention that as things stand now, bringing openness in your intimate life usually challenges most people's sense of security and stability. That doesn't mean that you cannot find stability in openness as well. It's totally possible. But at least at first, it probably will challenge some very basic assumptions that you have made more or less consciously, such as that, you know, someone is by your side as a lover and a partner. That is a security, a stability. In openness, that can still be there, but it will be challenged in many different ways. So what I usually recommend to people is that be honest with yourself. And if security and stability are priority number one in your sexual and intimate life right now, then maybe openness is not the easiest experiment for you to do today. If at any point priorities shift and you realize that, you know, security is still important, but it's not number one anymore, maybe number one is growth and evolution, or, going beyond fear, or simply experiencing different ways of living love and relationships, then I think the experiment is well worth doing it. Whatever you choose to do, my final suggestion is the following. Listen to your heart. Don't let anyone or anything or any collective idea or pressure force you into openness. That's not the good way to go about it. You should experiment with it only if both you and the person you are in a relationship with feel okay with it. And at the same time, the same goes for both ways. What I mean is that don't let anyone or any social pressure force you into closedness either. You really have to do relationships the way it seems correct to you in this moment of your life. And if 10 years down the line you will find out that that was just a crazy experiment and now you need to do things very, very differently, it's all good. We're here to experiment, we're here to learn, we're here to grow, and mistakes, experiments are part of the game. So listen to your heart, be true to yourself and to your aspiration and desires. Undoubtedly you will attract people that are similar to you in that respect, and you will be able to live the relationship life that you need at this moment fully in order to grow, in order to evolve, in order to experience love in so many different ways. Enjoy your intimacy, enjoy your love life. Thank you for being with me in this video. Goodbye.